Welcome back, folks. This is Venom, and you're here with the Casual Ride. Today we're going to be talking about shipping costs in the Midwest. So I'll plug with you. Okay, it's Venom. We're back with the Casual Ride, and we are checking out my Hunter build today. I'm actually working on our build right now. It's my Calibrant's hand. We'll see if I can get it working. This is a melee focus build where I should basically have infinite melees that essentially act like grenades. Now that we've gotten that part out of the way, I want to talk about Sherpas today. So, if you don't know, Sherpas are the title given to guardians that actually help other guardians get through both dungeons and raids. Typically, raids is what you would hear Sherpas referred to for. You know, typically you're looking for a Sherpa for a raid. I want to talk about good Sherpas and bad Sherpas. Now, there are plenty of bad Sherpas out there, and this is something that's been bugging me for a while, and I want to talk about it. No, I'm not going to kill on that one. So, for those who don't know, there are certain perks, well, really one perk you get for being a Sherpa, and that is you get a special emblem that is not available to anybody else. You get for getting so many guardians through a raid with, sorry, I'm trying to remember how this build works. For getting so many guardians through a raid for the first time, you actually unlock a special emblem. It is called the Sherpa emblem. And this is kind of coded around Sherpas because, you know, that's what we do. We teach people how to do it, and then that emblem is kind of a point of pride. You know, we've taught so many guardians how to get through raid, should have anyway, and this is our badge of honor. That's what we do. So I'm not someone who ever gets a day one clear. I do day one raids, yes, but I've never gotten a day one clear. Typically, Sherpas are where I get my fun from. Now, there are good Sherpas and there are bad Sherpas. Now, a good Sherpa is going to teach you how to do a raid, and I'll kind of go into what to look for in a good Sherpa later on. But there are bad Sherpas. I want to talk about why they exist and what I think we can do to fix the issue. Now, this all revolves on the fact that we get a special emblem, okay? And it revolves around the fact that, technically speaking, to count for your Sherpa, you only have to get somebody through the final boss of a raid. Now, it would be different if you had to get someone through the entire raid from start to finish. I would much prefer that. Instead, what we're getting are people that are not teaching raids. Instead, they are essentially telling people to join on them who have never done the raid before. In fact, they'll check the raid report to make sure you haven't done the raid before. They will... Sorry, I got hiccups. They will teach you how to do the final boss, and then that is it. They will do that just to pad out their Sherpa score, to get their Sherpa emblem, and to pad out their score. If you ever look, and if you're trying to learn how to do a raid, you ever look in LFG and you see anyone saying, you know, doing the final boss must not have done the raid before, that is what is going on. That is somebody trying to pad out their Sherpa emblem. You don't want to join that person, because they are essentially taking away your first experience doing the raid. They're not showing you how to do it. They're showing you how to do just enough for the final boss to get you through it, and then they're throwing you away. And then, not to sound like you're like a commodity or anything, but no other Sherpa can then use you to kind of, you know, get their Sherpa score in the future. Now, for most people that are Sherpaing, it's not going to matter. We're going to Sherpa whoever. We're going to keep doing it whether we get the score or not. But there's only so many Sherpa emblems to go around, because you only get them from taking someone through the raid who hasn't done it first. So once someone's done it, you know, once someone's done the raid, they can no longer be counted for that Sherpa emblem. Sherpas that just teach people the final boss and don't teach them the final raid are doing you no favors. They're essentially using you just to pad out their score. They don't care about whether or not you learn the raid. They don't care about whether or not you get your items. They don't care about whether or not you even understand the mechanics. They just care about getting their Sherpa emblem. And that's bad for everybody. That's bad for them because, well, probably not bad for them because they're going to get what they want out of it, but it's going to be bad for you because you're not going to know how to do the raid. And it's going to be bad for other Sherpas because, you know, they're not going to get the score they necessarily deserve. They're not going to get the emblem, you know, they might deserve it. Now, for the most part, I don't know anybody that's wanted the Sherpa emblem that hasn't got it, but it's still a pretty shitty thing to do, to just use other players to just farm out your Sherpa emblem. Now, that being said, I'm going to teach you, or tell you what you should be looking for. Holy crap, why is he that far back? I'll teach you what you should be looking for in a Sherpa. And typically, when a Sherpa is going to teach you, at the very least, all the mechanics of each encounter of the raid. And I don't mean just teaching some people the mechanics. They're going to explain how the actual raid mechanic works and why each section, why each part of each mechanic is important, what everything does. They'll walk you through it, they'll answer questions, and they'll have patience, and that's a big thing. Not everybody can be a Sherpa. And not because they don't want to, but because they don't necessarily have the skill or the temperament or the patience to do it. sometimes doing a Sherpa run, I did one Sherpa run that was amazing. I can't think it was King's Fall. I cannot forget it because I think it was everybody's first time. It was legitimately their first time doing the raid. We literally one-shotted everything, I think, for maybe Crota, I think not Crota, maybe Oryx we had to do twice. No, actually, no, we didn't. We actually one-shotted everything. We one-shotted the entire raid, and it was, we were all shocked. We were like, how the hell did we do that? That was amazing. And that was a legitimate Sherpa run. I actually got my points for it. I think that might have actually given me my King's Fall badge, or my King's Fall emblem for the Sherpa for it. And that was amazing. Now, are all of them like that? No, honestly, the majority of them, you're going to have a pretty mixed bag of people. Now, if you're setting up your own, or if the Sherpa setting up their own LOG to teach people, they're definitely going to be a mixed bag. You might see people that post saying, hey, teaching King's Fall or teaching Crota's Inn. That's usually a Sherpa, teaching people putting together their own group. Now, occasionally we'll be trolling around LFGs looking for people asking for a Sherpa, but a lot of times we're putting together our own groups. Now, if we're putting together our own groups, we're probably going to have a very mixed bag of people. We're going to have people that, may have done raids before. In fact, I'll tell you what I typically see when I do this. If I were to put out a Sherpa request right now saying, hey, I'm Sherping people, I'm typically going to get, maybe 2 or 3 people who haven't done it. I'm going to get one person who's done like half the raid, and I'm going to get one person who just didn't listen to anything that I put in the post and was like, yeah, I pass the raid, I do it all the time, and didn't listen to me saying new players only. You're going to see that. Now, don't do that. Don't be that guy who, if it says new players, don't be that guy who hops in who's like, yeah, I've done it all. I do these all the time. No, we're looking to teach new players, not to run you through your weekly raids. That's something you should be doing with your clan or with an LFG that's not trying to learn. And I say that because oftentimes it's those people who will quit first. You will see a lot of times in LFG groups, people will quit after 1 or 2 wipes. I was doing a raid earlier, and we got to the very end of Crota, the very first encounter, and somebody pulled the relic off of me early, and I could not enlighten the plate, and we ran out of time. Somebody quit right after that. It was only our second time going through, and there's people learning how to do it. That's a shitty thing to do, and he was a person who had done the raid before, too. So don't join a group learning how to do the raid if you're... I'm not even going to say if you're going to quit. I'll say if a group is learning and someone's advertising for people who haven't done it before and it's a legitimate Sherpa, don't join that group. That's for people trying to learn how to do it, not to get your weekly raid quarter in or to just, do the raid. You can find other LGs for that. Now, you can't ask them. You can message them and say, hey, can I join in? I've done it before. Anything like that, if you ask and they get permission, that's fine. But make sure you do that. Now, you're typically going to see that it is going to be a bit like pulling teeth, especially if you have people that haven't raided before. Now, you want to make sure, and this is me really, it's not really me saying what you're looking for in a raid. At this point, I'm just telling Sherpas what to do, or telling you how to be a Sherpa. So what you typically want to do is you want to make sure that before you even load in the raid, understand not everybody uses stuff like Destiny Item Manager or the apps. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that everybody has all the weapons they're going to need for the raid, as well as being at light level. You'll be surprised when people join. You tell them, hey, you're going to need this weapon, or I suggest you have this one. They swap to it, and they don't even have an enhancement core to get it up to light. It's 1600. So make sure, go to the helm. That's usually the best place to go to. Go to the helm. It's going to be less busy. You can load in quicker. You let them know each encounter, hey, this first encounter is going to be ad clear. Bring whatever you want. The second one is going to have, this kind of champion, so you're going to want to have this. It's going to be ad clear. The third one, you're going to have a boss damage. I would suggest linear fusions or this. You want to go through each one by one and let the guys go ahead and grab their weapons. And again, it is important that you go to the helm for this, because you would be surprised how many people that are doing raids when you learn how to do it do not have stuff like Destiny Item Manager. Don't go in thinking that these are going to be experienced people. There are a lot of things that we take advantage of, and that we take for granted as experienced raiders. So you got to really go in and remember, these are going to be people that do not do raids all the time. You want to go through and explain each encounter. Now, I don't necessarily get too big on people's builds. I don't go through and ask who's got divinity, who's got what. I typically leave people's builds to it, unless I see them doing something weird, like using a roaming super against orcs or something. Okay, obviously that is not something we can do. But yeah, for the most part, besides that, I will go ahead and make sure they know the encounter. Like today, this is ad clear. This is how you do each mechanic. This is why you do each thing. I'll make sure that they kind of know why we do each thing as well. That way they understand the mechanic as a whole. They don't just learn that one mechanic too. They can go into a raid later on and say, okay, I may not have done this mechanic, but I've got an idea how it'll work. Something else I like to go through and do, I like to teach every part of the raid too. So hidden chests, I mean, it sounds like it's a given. You'd be surprised how many people, want a Sherpa or want to join in on a group that's learning, and then we go through and say, hey, let's get the chests to show how to do it. And they're like, no, we don't need a chest. Like, no, these are new people. They need to know where the chests are at. Raid borders is another big one. There are people that have done raids before that don't know what the raid borders are, that are just returning, that haven't been in since raid borders were introduced, or since, red border chests were introduced, so keep that in mind too. You're going to want to do the red border chest. I need to actually start using the dang build correctly here. I keep forgetting that. I definitely got to power this up a bit. So yeah, make sure you're doing every part of it. So if it's something like a King's Fall, make sure you're showing them, hey, this is how you do the red border. Here's how you do the puzzle. Here's where you find all these at. I've even got some of the maps and the symbols saved in my Discord, so I can actually show them to people. When I'm doing Sherpering, I do tend to try to bring people into my Discord if possible, just because it's so much easier to teach there, because I can actually share, maps with them. I can actually share what the symbols are like. Let's say I'm doing Vow Disciple. I mean, there's 26 different symbols you have to learn. That is a lot easier to do when you can look over and see the cheat sheet. It's a lot harder to do in the microphone in-game. Not everybody can do that, though, so you do have to be prepared for a lot of that. If you're Sherpering, you also need to know what every single aspect of the raid is yourself, because the people going in are not going to know. So if you're just somebody who's going in and you're like, okay, I want a Sherpa, but you don't actually know every single role, you can't do that. You need to know every role because you have to teach that role. Now, it sounds like something that should be obvious, but it's not. You need to actually make sure you know that role. When I first got into Sherpering, I realized as I was going through, I still got the most kills, but still not quite as many as I wanted. Something that I had to remind myself, or something I had to learn the hard way, was that I need to know what all the roles are. I was going through and I was trying to teach people how to do the raid, and I realized as I got to certain parts, like, okay, I knew the basics of how a certain mechanic was supposed to work, but then I realized I don't know why it worked. I don't know what the ins and outs of it are. It's not just you need to know how to do it. You need to actually do that yourself. So you actually have to practice some raids yourself when you're doing it. Go through, do the mechanic. That way, it also gives you an idea of what to look out for. You're standing in plates, or, you're doing, let's say you're doing the, totems in King's Fall at the very beginning. If you're doing that, you've done every part of that, because you're just running around. But let's say you're doing totems. I mean, you should know that there's going to be knights that spawn up top. There are going to be knights that spawn down below. If you've never done that mechanic, which again, you should have, but if you never have, you're not going to be able to tell people, hey, look out for these titans that are going to spawn here. You're going to make sure you want it like a sniper or a linear equipped, or look out for this. You're going to have rocket launchers equipped. You want to make sure you've done every actual mechanic yourself personally, so that you can then describe it and answer questions too. There may be questions that somebody has that you can't answer because you don't know that mechanic. Let's take, Golgoroth, for example. I had somebody ask me, I was teaching in King's Fall a couple weeks ago. Well, I just hopped in one, but they had some questions for it. And they were asking, hey, what happens if we don't pop all the bubbles up top? If you don't know what that mechanic does, you can't answer that, and you actually may cause a wipe. For those who don't know, Golgoroth, there are certain, bubbles up top you have to shoot that drops down a pool of light you stand in to do damage. Now, in Destiny 1, you could actually kind of clear them in just doing one. You didn't have to drop them all. You could technically just do one and then rinse and repeat. And there were quite a few runs where people were just one-shotting them. You can't do that in Destiny 2. You're not going to one-shot them. And you do need to drop all those. If you were to try to just do one bubble each round, you're going to wipe on the second round, because there's a mechanic to where each bubble you don't pop is going to count against you. And after 6 bubbles that you don't pop, it's an automatic wipe. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You will wipe. It's a mechanic. Now, if you don't understand that mechanic, you can't teach it. You're going to end up wiping a lot and not realizing why. So, like I said, you definitely have to play the raids, and you can't just do the Destiny 1 versions for them. For the older ones, you need to do the Destiny 2 versions of them, because they all have changes in them. Now, they may not be huge changes, but they are changes nonetheless. There we go. I'll swap my build up a little bit. We're going to be using the Gunpowder Gamble, so we'll try that. What are some other things? You yourself need to be prepared to take on any role in a raid, and to have all your characters ready. Now, I am an advocate of not having to use a Well of Radiance for a raid, but there are some times to where your team is just so inexperienced that Well of Radiance may be the difference between them passing and them not passing. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm so into it not getting nerfed. Same with Divinity. Now, I don't typically take Divinity to Sherpa raids. In fact, I actively avoid doing it. If I have somebody who's got it, I typically tell them don't do it. They need to learn how to do it without it. And I want them to learn that you do not have to have divinity for this kind of stuff. Now, I will hop on and use the Well of Radiance if my team doesn't have any Warlocks or something. I'll go ahead and hop on and kind of help them out. That will might give us just the extra, second of survivability to kill orcs or to kill Crota. Or it might not. We may just totally devastate it. Now, for experienced groups, something like Well of Radiance, you may be able to get by without doing it, without using Well of Radiance. But for newer groups or groups that haven't done it before, that little bit of extra help may be the difference between passing and not passing, which is why it's so important that we don't nerf stuff like that. The people that advocate for nerfing stuff like that are typically people who have already done the raids, and they can do it with their eyes closed. They're people that do, day one stuff. They're people that do contest mode quite often. Well of Radiance and Divinity really aren't for them at this point. I mean, you can go ahead and do the run without it. You don't need to have it nerfed for everybody else because, 1% of the population finds it too easy or want to have different tactics. You can go ahead and use new tactics now. Like I said, I just did a raid with all Hunters doing Guardian games. I mean, I'm sure people did raids with all Warlocks and raids with all Titans, and they're not hard to do. I mean, all Hunters is actually pretty fun. I do plan on doing a raid with all Hunters, none of us using Golden Gun, and I'm going to try to divide up the supers. I don't want it to all be like, Mobius Quiver or anything. I want to try to get different supers in there. I want to stray away from the meta just to prove that not only can you beat the raids without using the meta, but that an LFG group can do it. Now, there are some groups, like I'm saying, and I don't want you to get me the wrong idea, there are some groups that are LFG that definitely do need to have that extra boost, and I don't want that boost taken away just because, the top tier players or the people that do raids all the time think it's too easy at that point, or think, they're getting tired of doing the exact same thing. You may be tired of doing it, but the majority of the Destiny 2 population, the majority of Guardians have never done it. So don't take that away from them. So what else for Sherpas? Besides having each character ready, you need to know the ins and outs of every character. And I'm not going to say every build, but you should have a good idea of what some of the exotics are used for some builds. I mean, there are exotics that I've never used before for every class, including Hunter, and I am a Hunter main. I mean, there are some I've just never used, so I've never been interested in. Now that I'm doing builds, I am using exotics I've never used before. Like, I was using the Severance Enclosure for the Titan. It's not one I'd ever thought about using before, because it didn't really appeal to me. It's one of my favorite exotics now. So definitely look into, checking out some basic exotics for every class, for every role. I'm not saying you got to know every single exotic, but if you are going to have a Well of Radiance, what are some good exotics that go with Well of Radiance? What are some good builds for that? For the Titan, what are some good builds to use if you're going to be doing, Bubble? What are some good ones to have just kind of as a general, to kind of help the raid out since you're going to be using Bubble? What else can you use exotic-wise that's really going to help you out with that? I mean, there's not too many exotics that are going to help you out with your Bubble that are really going to help out in a raid. Yeah, there's a Helm of Satan 14. It's not really going to help you do much damage in a raid. It'll just help you with the ads. It's not going to do a whole lot for you. So you really want to have a good idea of exotics you can use for every class, for every subclass, and for basic builds, for your basic build. That's why I have my, that's why I titled my series Basic Builds, because I do want people to understand some basic builds for their stuff. And that is something else too. You do need to understand basic builds for, and basic build crafting for each class too. It's going to be kind of hard for you to Sherpa or run, and if the only thing you've ever played is a Will Warlock, or, a Necrotic Grip Warlock. If you never played any other class, it's going to be very hard for you to Sherpa or run because you don't know how to help if, say, a Hunter is having issues. Let's say you got a Void Hunter on your team and they're having issues dying a lot. Or let's say, for example, you got a Void Hunter and they're doing Golgoroth, where it takes King's Fall again. You got a Void Hunter with invisibility build and they're trying to do the gaze mechanic for Golgoroth, and for some reason they keep losing their gaze. Where if you don't play a Hunter or don't understand how Hunters work, you won't understand that he's going invisible and that's causing him to lose that gaze for Golgoroth. If you don't understand that, you're gonna basically keep getting your team killed because you can't tell them, hey, if you do that, that's going to get us killed. If you turn invisible, you will lose the gaze. That is something that was changed for Destiny 2, and that, yeah, I actually found out on week 1 doing it because I was trying to get his gaze, and every time I went invisible, we were losing it, and that's when we figured out as a team, we're like, hey, when you go invisible, he loses your gaze because he can't see you. That's cool. It's annoying, but yeah, it's a cool change, but we got to make sure we're not doing that now. Same thing goes for Titan. I mean, you may have a Titan who's really struggling to not die. He may be using some exotics that don't necessarily work for his for his build and you won't have any recommendations for him. Or he may only have one exotic, and he may be using it on the wrong subclass. You never know. He may be using, say, Helm of Saint 14 on a Strand subclass. He's got no other exotics, and you need to tell him, hey, this is for Void subclass. You need to go ahead and use that for that. So having a basic idea of every class and some of their basic builds, and most commonly used builds, is going to be a good idea. Now, you're going to need to have an idea of build crafting to do that as well. So you're going to need to make sure you know what all the stats do. It's not a difficult thing either to know what all the stats do. It's something that is really basic. You're going to need to explain to your team what stats do too. Now, while I do tend to not tell my groups how to make their builds for raids, if I do notice somebody struggling, then I will kind of try to give them some pointers. I do take a look at their builds just so I kind of know what I'm getting into and I can kind of work around it. But unless I see something really crazy, I'm not gonna, kind of tell them what to do. Like, for example, if I see somebody with a PvP build, all their armor's got like stuff for, aiming down sights quicker. It's got accuracy mods on it. And it's got a lot of, let's say it's a hunter and it's got like no mobility whatsoever. It's got nothing but recovery on it and a little bit of intellect. It's not really going to help you. I forgot to duck. I forgot to change that to duck. Must my damn duck. I redid my damn. I'm going to have to redo this. I redid my keys not too long ago. But yeah, if you don't understand why that's bad, I'm sorry. I could easily recognize that as a PvP build. If you don't recognize some builds, then that can also cause some issues too. You definitely need to recognize some of the basic builds and what some of the basic stats and setups are. I've taken a lot of PvP mains through raids before that had no idea how to do raids or had never done them much. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. But yeah, I've taken a lot of PvP mains through raids, and some were surprised at just how different PvE builds are versus PvP. Now, they learn it pretty quick. I mean, it's not like they're dumb or anything. They just don't do a lot of PvE stuff, or at least they don't do, the in-game PvE stuff. Now, all this also applies to things like Sherpering dungeons, too. Dungeons aren't nearly as intensive as raids are, especially since a lot of them can be done solo. But the same thing's going to go for dungeon Sherpering as it does for raid Sherping. You want to make sure you're explaining stuff. You want to kind of help people out with their builds if they need it. And you also want to make sure that you're having patience. And this is something you really need to make sure that you're... No, I was trying to do trick cut. You really got to make sure that you have patience, too. There's going to be a lot of mistakes when you're Sherpering. There's going to be a lot of mistakes that people make. You got to make sure that you have the patience to deal with those mistakes and to not take those mistakes personally. It is very hard to Sherpa when it seems like people just aren't getting it. Like the totems, for example. I'm using King's Pearl as an example because it's my favorite raid. So totems, for example, it is. Oh, they're still down there. Totems is a very easy encounter to do, but it's also a very easy one to screw up. War Priest is the DPS check of the raid. Those two are going to tell me how a raid group is going to perform. He took them all already. The totems is going to tell me how will they perform as a team. And then the War Priest is going to tell me exactly how much DPS they can put out. You're going to have to kind of benchmark things too and understand how to benchmark. Along with knowing kind of what the meta setups are for damage, stuff. That kind of stuff. So if you're noticing that a lot of people are just having trouble with certain aspects, especially the working together part. A lot of people that have been doing Destiny solo are not used to working with other people. They're used to doing everything solo. They don't understand that you can't just go off and do your own thing. You do have to work as a team. That is something that you have to teach people, and that can be kind of hard and very frustrating sometimes. So you got to make sure you got patience. You got to make sure you got to teach them to work together and why it's so important. Raids are not solo sports. These are team sports, and that's the biggest thing. It's not a matter of doing damage. 9 times out of 10, if you fail, it's because of teamwork, not damage. Now, there are definitely times where you fail because you just don't have the damage output. You may have to ultra fire, you may have to swap weapons, you may have to do some different builds, you may have to get some elemental mods on your shit, but most of the time you're not going to fail because of damage when you're Sherpering. You're going to fail because of lack of working together, or lack of mechanical knowledge, I should say, not doing the mechanics correctly. And as a Sherpa, some of that's going to be on you. Now, some of it is going to be learning, or some of it's going to be just growing pains. Some people just have to be, it just takes them a while to learn. They've never done it before, and even if they have done a raid before, if it's the first time doing a raid, it is going to take time. And once you've done it a while, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for you. But, yeah, you're just going to have to be patient, and you got to basically be able to just, like, teach every aspect of it. You're basically your teacher at this point, so you got to really treat them not like kids. I mean, don't explain it to them like they're idiots. Don't explain them to Guardians like they're stupid. I mean, most of us are adults. There are some kids, but we understand basics. But just understand in a basic way you would want to explain to you, and you should be good to go. I mean, don't get on somebody for something you think might be a dumb mistake. They may have misunderstood what you said, or they may not have understand something you said. Or it could be you explained something incorrectly, too. There were plenty of times where I definitely forgot to explain a few mechanics, and forgot to the last minute when they popped. It was like, okay, well, I got this. There's this timer here. There's a second timer. What am I supposed to do? I don't have the buff anymore. I'm like, oh, shit, I forgot to explain that part. That's completely my fault. So you also have to be able to not only have patience with your team that you are trying to teach, have patience with yourself too, especially when you first start teaching a raid. And it's not just, you're not just learning how to Sherpa, or you're not just teaching people how to do a raid. When you're first starting off, you're actually learning how to Sherpa too. Even if you've done every part of a raid, just because you know how to do a raid does not mean you know how to Sherpa. So you're going to have to learn your teaching style. When I explain a raid, I dumb it down almost like, you know, I do YouTube, which is what I'd like to do. I explain it like I would if I was doing a YouTube video. I've had people actually say, hey, there's a YouTube explanation in the middle of me talking. It was like they're breaking it down like a YouTuber. I'm like, yeah, that's how I explain things. Everybody's got their own teaching style, but you're going to have to find yours, and it's not necessarily going to be the same style somebody else has. Now, have patience with yourself, too. When you're first starting off, you're going to make mistakes, and people will get frustrated with you, too, because they're trusting you to teach. If you want, I would say, if you want a little bit of help Sherpering, one, you can contact me down below, and, you know, I can help you with it. But if you're looking, you can also say, hey, Sherpering, but also looking for additional help, too. There are plenty of times where I've joined somebody who says teaching, but could use, you know, additional guardians to help out, that kind of thing. You'll see that quite a bit, so... that's going to do it for today as far as the Sherping and the talking goes. Yeah, I already got to those because I got really into talking about Sherping. I forgot to use the build too much, but we'll mess with that one a little bit more. This isn't a release build right now either, so I'm really experimenting a bit more with it too, so I'm not overly worried about it. But yeah, that's going to do it for today. I'll talk more Sherpas later. I'll talk about a few other aspects of the game, but for now, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you all for coming by. If you like it, like it. If you loved it, sub. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you later.